Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the fifth episode of the Democracy Fight Club. If you did not already, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter and Instagram for more updates. My name is Malik Sakic, and I will be your host for today. Note to our new listeners, Democracy Fight Club is a place for you to tune in and listen to youth from across the globe, talking about their countries, about their work to champion democratic values, and about what all of us can do together to make this world a better place. After the great episode from the last time, we are moving to Zimbabwe. I'm very happy to welcome a true young leader, democratic champion, and civic activist, and my fellow digital enthusiast. Mantate am I good at the pronunciation? I'll let you introduce yourself in case I miss anything. She's a program leader at Magamba Network, an award-winning organization using creative forms of youth activism to build a democratic and to build a democratic justice in Zimbabwe. She coordinates the Arts4Change Program, which focuses on the use of music, film, satire, and comedy to promote dialogue on social justice, accountability, and integrity. Welcome, and thank you for being our guest today. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, and you can introduce yourself in a better way than I did.
No, I think it was great. So my name is pronounced as Mantate Mlotshwa.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, you'll get used to
it. We kick off each episode with asking our guests to have to give us 3 words that best describe their country. So for our listeners across the world, what are the 3 words that best describe Zimbabwe?
So initially, when I saw the question, I thought, oh my God, would be the best description. But I think the 3 words maybe would be a nation. It's more of a people of resilience, I think, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's always kind of hard to answer that question. I would agree with you that it's also, if you ask me to describe Bosnia, oh my God, would be definitely the best description. But I definitely get you in that. But I think you used a good example. You are a producer and a host of the Resistance Bureau, a program that aims to amplify the voices of leading activists, civil society representatives, journalists, and political leaders across Africa, and to build solidarity between them. This is definitely hard and like most important job that you're doing. How difficult it is to bring all these people together, and what has been your experience during the whole process?
Okay, so yeah, it's a great platform, really, especially for me as a young person very passionate about democracy. I joined the Resistance Bureau when we started the program in July last year. And like the premise is bringing together leading African voices around issues of democracy, human rights, and the struggle for freedom in Africa. So I think what has made it a little bit, I can't say easier, but it's been a little bit of a seamless process for us. It's not been difficult getting people on board. We've got an amazing team that is connected across different parts of Africa and outside. So you discover that because we have a common goal with a lot of those people that we bring on board to talk about those issues, I think that's been like our point of departure, where when you approach Bobby Wine in Uganda or Tundulisi in Tanzania, Fatima in Zimbabwe, or whoever it is you're trying to work with, it's always easier to say, this is the kind of issue that we champion, and this is how we see you fitting into it. So people kind of find that like the confidence to be a part of this process, because it also builds them within their different contexts.
That is great. And we had our prep conversation last week, and then during the conversation we touched base on the current, I would say, socio-political situation in your country, and you identify the freedom of speech as a burning issue in your country. Like, can you share a bit more info what our to our listeners, why is that so?
Okay, I think in any nation where, well, so-called democratic countries, one of the things that is very much constitutional right for those countries with constitutions is the freedom of expression. The very essence of a citizen being able to speak freely their opinions around issues happening in their country and their government and things like that. So I think Zimbabwe is one of the so-called, or rather, well, one of those democratic African countries. Freedom of speech is embedded in our constitution. But you discover that the main thing has been that there is no freedom after speech. Like, I can tell you that I'm 25 today, and for the longest time, I think I've seen more people experiencing consequences, certain, laws against them because they express themselves. So I think there's that question of, do we really have the freedom after we speak? They allow you to speak, which is the freedom of expression, the freedom of speech. But when you finish speaking, someone comes to your house and says, this is what you were saying on Twitter. This is what you were saying on WhatsApp or whatever it is. And then you actually get into trouble with it. We've had people that were arrested and sent to a maximum prison for something they said online. So I think one of the things that we really struggle with in Zimbabwe is the issue of freedom of speech. And one of the things I wanted to really note out is in October last year, the government of Zimbabwe, we had an article on the Sunday Mail where they were talking about a patriotic bill that was being tabled in the parliament, that was being proposed. So this patriotic bill, apparently, when I quoted the statement I got from the paper, it says that it's framed around the issue of promoting and protecting national interest. So the craziest thing is this patriotic bill in its essence seeks to sort of criminalize private correspondence with foreign governments. So in other words, you cannot speak about Zimbabwe in a certain way with foreign governments, with foreign agencies, without the government kind of clearing that as being okay to say. So what that does is that when an opposition party, when civil society leaders or young people generally speaking against the government of Zimbabwe, in other words, it criminalizes that, which comes back to the issue of when a young person decides to speak about their real experience of what they're going through in their country. If it speaks against the government, when a young person says the government of Zimbabwe is corrupt because they failed to deal with, let's say, Minister of Health who embezzled funds and got away without really paying anything back, you discover that it's almost like you are a criminal for saying that. But the truth is you're just stating what you're experiencing, which for me is the craziest thing. And then the other thing I want to mention also around the issue of freedom of expression would be the 31 July protests. In Zimbabwe last year, people planned protests for the 31st of July. And I think this patriotic bill came actually later after this protest, and there was a whole online movement. I'll talk about it. So on the 31st of July, Zimbabweans were being mobilized to gather together in their different ways. It may not be gathering together because of the COVID situation, but also finding ways to protest. It can be Mantate stepping out of my house with a placard, writing something about corruption in Zimbabwe. So it was more of an anti-corruption campaign or protest, if I can put it that way. But you discover that in Zimbabwe, when you speak of corruption, there's a whole lot of issues that then come in. So citizens are actually preparing for that. And while people didn't show up in numbers per se on that day, because I remember how, because of COVID restrictions, the government kind of dictates the curfews and stuff. So they kind of use that situation we've decided to revise the terms of the COVID-19 regulations. So the curfew has been, type thing. That's kind of the environment that we're in. But I remember how a lot of people stepped out. We had a lot of, young people, older people stepping out in different. Someone would actually take a placard and walk around in their neighborhood, speaking something. It can be issues of the government of Zimbabwe should, account for certain resources that we still don't know, where did they go? It can be young people. I remember there was a young person in Bulawayo called Nigel Mzovo. So he's placarded something like, all my issues are in this placard. That was his protest message. And this is one of the young men that actually got arrested for that, because apparently they were actually mobilizing people, inciting violence. And I've just always sat here and said, these are ordinary people asking a government to account, where the health minister last year, Obadiah Moyo, was said to embezzle COVID-19 relief funds. And to this day, he's not stepped into prison. He paid $50,000 bail, and this was Zim dollars. So literally the fraction of money he paid as bail for the kind of money embezzled. It didn't make sense, but he got away. But you find people that are actually calling this government to account for these resources and other things also that are outside this, the resources embezzled by the minister. But you discover those are the people that go to the maximum prison. Those are the people that get arrested. These are the people that get kidnapped, beaten up, and all those crazy things. So I think in Zimbabwe, there's this selective application of the law that makes it very difficult for people to express themselves, because as Mantate, I would think, okay, if I want to step out now and say the government of Zimbabwe is taking advantage of the COVID-19 and doing all those things to kind of suppress voices, if I decide to walk around with the placard, you discover that I'll not sleep at home today. But if someone decides to embezzle funds, he shows up in a suit to court, he doesn't go to prison. So there's this, injustice in the way that the law is applied that makes it difficult for a lot of people to kind of step out. It's almost a sign to say, you should look at Hopo Chinono. He was arrested for saying something on Twitter. You should look at Jacob Ngarivume, for instance. So when you look at those people and what happens to them when they speak, obviously there's that tendency to kind of think twice before you say something online.
Wow. when you said an issue of the freedom of speech, I really didn't expect to hear all of these things. But I don't know. For example, in our country, it's also kind of, I wouldn't say it's I don't know, forbidden but there are some people who I don't know, had bad experience after expressing their opinions. But we also have like people who are popular on like social media and who criticize the government and like who I don't know, go to TV stations like just to talk about how corrupt like the government is, what is happening. Like they are really popular and like people want to listen to them. Like, do you have anything like that in your country? Like do you have kind of specific person who are, I mean, I understand what kind of regulations people have, but is there anyone who I don't know is I would say popular because he criticized or she criticized the government, and what kind of experience did he have in the country?
Oh yeah, we actually have a couple of people. There is this one particular lady. Her name is Tandegile. So for every tweet that she shares, there's always hashtag ZANU-PF must go. That's the signature statement for her.
Yeah.
Even if she's tweeting about the weather, oh, it's cold today, hashtag ZANU-PF must go. If she's tweeting about, like COVID restrictions or COVID infections going up, she will say hashtag ZANU-PF must go. Yeah, so one of the things that I saw happening mostly towards the 31st of July and just after that as well, a lot of people began to use that as well. You find that someone would tweet a joke or someone would respond to something and say ZANU-PF must go. Even now, if you tweet something and someone comes to your comments to just comment, if they're angry, they're like ZANU-PF must go. So this is one young lady that really is known across the country and also just outside them. That's really stuck to that. For her, it's very simple. That's the message she has. She feels that the problem in Zimbabwe is ZANU-PF. So for her, the solution is ZANU-PF going. So you find that other people that then kind of believe in the same concept or feel convinced the same way, then follow up, actually take up the same mantra. But then you also find there's other young people as well. There's this young lady here in Harare. Her name is Namatai Kwikeza. She's the director of a youth organization called We Lead. And one of the things she's been championing really has been the issue of the constitutional amendment in Zimbabwe, where we had, like a proposed, in Zim, they propose a lot of things that frustrate people. But anyway, so they proposed to make certain amendments to the constitution of Zimbabwe. So part of the provision or the clauses that were then proposed, a lot of people don't agree with them, especially issues of the youth representation. There's a clause that specifically looks at introducing a youth quota system in which 10 young people from across Zimbabwe will be selected in every election to represent the youth of Zimbabwe in parliament, which has been very problematic in a way, because everyone's like, Zimbabwe is a young nation. A majority of people here are young people, but you want young people to have 10 seats somehow. That should make us feel better, that suddenly there is something for us. And there's also a proposed extension of the women's quota system. We already have a quota system for women. So there's a lot of people that have a lot of issues around a lot of those clauses. And one of the things that Namatai has done for the longest time has been driving these online conversations around getting young people to understand what this constitutional amendment means for them. And I remember last year, she also did this one-man protest where she took a placard as well. and was speaking against this whole constitutional amendment. And I remember she also had this loudspeaker, and she wasn't even gathering people. She just went around telling people about this constitutional amendment and talking about why she feels it's not okay, the inconsistencies and things like that. She got arrested. She's a very young woman. She's a very, very young, vibrant young woman, but she got arrested. And it wasn't even the first time. I think she's gotten arrested twice around the same issue. So you discover that there were other issues that came about later. And I think it's one of those things that kind of reflect, for like I said earlier, that you look at people that are doing something about issues in the country and you see them get punished for it. It's almost like it's done deliberately so that you know that if you do this, this will happen to you too. You know, when you find someone surveying your house, like there's surveillance at your house, there's a car outside that's parked outside your house, there's people following you around type thing. So it's a number of people really speaking online. But like I said earlier, there's almost always a law against you after you speak.
But it's kind of, I would say it is good because they're kind of setting a bit new, I would say, trends on social media and try to engage people and like, even though in bad circumstances like that is it, like it could have an issue, but they are, I would say they're definitely doing something good, and also like freedom of speech is definitely a topic that is of utmost importance, and in today's world, which is like, we can definitely say, learning to be a digital democracy, it is very challenging to ensure like respect of human rights online, and like many countries, including ours, are struggling with like hate speech, regulation of like online outlets, etc. And like from your experience, what would be the steps to ensure freedom of speech and at the same time counter hate speech online?
Yeah, I think the first thing I always tell people when it comes to issues of expression in countries where it's difficult to speak, my argument is always never stop speaking. Yeah. Because whatever it is they do to stop people from talking, when you stop talking, they've won. That's what they want. So it's really just about people finding alternative ways of speaking truth to power. I think it's very important. And then also, I think for me, it's also an issue of stakeholders as well, as governments across Africa, across the world. There is need to allow people the freedom and space to progressively engage. You know, a lot of our countries are very polarized. Like in Zimbabwe right now, the politics is so toxic that if I speak against the leader of opposition right now, it's easy for people to say I'm pro-ZANU-PF. If I speak against ZANU-PF today, it's automatic. It's almost always automatic that I'm supposed to be opposition. So there is no space for people to objectively, criticize, so people comment, So I think we really kind of need a space that is facilitated space by the state, because they stand to gain more when people honestly express themselves around issues where they're saying we're not happy with that. This is how we prefer you to lead things. That is the concept of, you know, constitutional leadership or citizen agency, whatever it is. But also, I think the other thing is an issue of finding common ground as people online, because I think when Mantate is the only one speaking around an issue, it's easy for Mantate to get targeted and something to happen to me. But when everyone has a collective, you know, voice around that issue and people are speaking online, it's very difficult for you to target everyone that's speaking. So even if you arrest someone, for instance, when Zimbabwe arrested Jacob Ngarivume and Hopewell Chinono after the 31 July protests, you discover that a lot of people were speaking online and asking the government to free Hopewell Chinono, to free Jacob Ngarivume and things like that. So you find that there's more, I feel like there's more people that get encouraged to speak out when more people kind of support their voices, so that we don't act like these guys are just speaking on issues that we don't experience. We do experience them. We need to find ways of supporting them. And then also, I think one of the ways in which we can utilize the digital space to kind of mobilize voices around certain issues. If you look at the Zimbabwean Lives Matter, the movement that came in after the 31 July protests and things like that, you find that there's an AKA, a musician in South Africa, who tweeted about it, who spoke about it and said, you know, Zimbabwean Lives Matter, you know, just highlighting some of the brutalities that are happening in Zimbabwe, some of the injustices. And you find that other celebrities then began to pick it up. I was so shocked that people in America, people in Canada, Germany, people in Ethiopia, in Kenya, and different places, this way, big names that were speaking around this issue, discovered that it was trending at a global level. It was spotlighting some of the issues that are critical in Zimbabwe. That's why you end up with the patriotic bill where the government feels, okay, we need to control how you guys kind of speak about Zimbabwe outside. So I think there's something to learn around issues like that. And then also another movement that I think can be an example for us to show how international solidarity can actually help in amplifying issues. If you look at the End SARS movement in Nigeria, if you look at the Shutdown Namibia movement around issues of gender-based violence, so you discover that a Mantate in Zimbabwe with a certain number of followers, as someone in South Africa with a certain number of followers on different platforms, can actually amplify what's happening there. If you look at the elections in Uganda, there was a time when the internet was down and no one was able to speak, but you found that a lot of people outside were finding ways of amplifying the issues around the election. So I think one of the things that we really need to find ways of encouraging across our countries, across the region and things like that is for the issue of solidarity, being able to find common areas and say, oh, young people in this country are facing this, how about we amplify this? And I think the other thing is we've got regional bodies that in a lot of instances are quiet when things are happening in countries, when people are being victimized and brutalized and things like that. So I think what happens is that when young people outside those countries build an agency, build voices around issues and put pressure on certain regional bodies like the SADC, the African Union, the United Nations, I feel like there's a greater pressure to account. There's a greater pressure to respond when it's more people kind of speaking into the issue. And then the last thing would be on the issue of hate speech as well. This thing is real and it affects a lot of us. And I think in Zimbabwe, one of the things I've seen is that there's a tendency when Mantate speaks or a certain young person speaks so much online, you get a lot of ghost accounts following you on Twitter. You find a lot of ghost accounts speaking about you. And they raise this nonsense thing. You talk about corruption, someone will come and tell you that, oh, you don't even have a job, you're failing to, secure a job, or you're still living at your mother's house, or your last relationship went out this way, or you're not married and you're 35. And I'm just always like, okay, so there's always an effort to create this ghost account so that you kind of shut down voices. And sometimes also, I think the other thing is because of this political polarization, there's an abruptness, there's this quickness around us where when someone speaks against the leader of opposition, which should be okay if he's wrong, someone comes in to say you're pro-government. I think we need to learn as citizens as well to be comfortable around like uncomfortable conversations where someone speaks against me. It should be okay. I should open up to them. So I think hate speech is something that we need to counter. It's not just coming from the government, it's also coming from our own peers, when you decide to speak and everyone feels like, oh, you think you're better off, things like that. So I think we need to find creative ways of countering hate speech. And part of that goes back to the issue of solidarity. When someone is being attacked, it's our duty to come in and kind of defend them, come in and kind of fight on their behalf as well, because someone may not be able to just fight for themselves. And then the last thing also would be the idea that with technology now, there's creative ways of passing messages without disrespecting other people. Like you find TikTok, it's a very funny, platform. People will have fun on TikTok. But I've seen a lot of people use TikTok to actually speak like on issues, like simple things.
Spread the voice.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's about finding creative ways in which we can still laugh, but we're talking real issues. That would be nice. I would love for us to talk about issues without attacking each other. Let's attack the issues.
Just have like a constructive dialogue, I would say, on any topics, and like not to get mad on everything. Also, one of the things after we had our last call, an important area where you're very active is working with and supporting vulnerable groups, and talking about current topics such as, I don't know, COVID-19 challenges, like the empowerment of women and girls and also young people. How would you, I would say, evaluate the role of these marginalized groups, particularly in the previous year amid the pandemic?
Yeah, I think the greatest feature around the COVID-19 period since the beginning of the year has been when Zimbabwe went on lockdown, I think it was on the 30th of March, 2020.
Yeah.
And going on lockdown meant that access to information became very digitalized. It meant that education turned digital. It meant that work was done, and there was now like this Zoom that everyone was supposed to understand, Skype and all these other things. So you discover that at a level of digital access, women are still very marginalized. You know, in Southern Africa, I was reading this article and they're talking about how internet penetration for women still remains below 30%. So you discover that there is few women available online or accessing information or active online. And already that becomes a problem because in a lot of those countries, women are a majority. So I think the voices of women were kind of then limited automatically by virtue of those lockdowns that meant that a lot of things went digital. And then the other thing about women as well, especially on issues of politics, you know, democracy, one thing I've seen is that when it's a woman speaking, or it's a woman, if someone disagrees with a woman, the first thing she's called is "you're a slut." That's the common term. So women are consistently abused online when they decide to speak. So you discover that even when she's wrong, like people are not always right. Yeah. When she's wrong, people have a problem engaging her on the issue that she's wrong at, but they're so quick to say you're a slut. Your last relationship didn't work out because of this. You're not married, you're 35. So you discover that for a lot of women, some tend to step back. And as a young woman myself, if I'm seeing a 40-year-old who's very established in Zimbabwe being disrespected like that, it means that at some point there is that consideration to say, what will make me different if I speak? Maybe I will also be abused and I may not have the same fan base as her to kind of defend me. So you discover that when we see other women abused, there is a tendency for young women to think, okay, maybe this space is not so safe for women. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that women face. And also the issue of gender-based violence as well. It was on the rise during this COVID-19 pandemic because a lot of women are forced to then stay at home with their perpetrators. Like long ago, you discover that people would just go to work, spend the entire day at work and show up in the evening. But now I'm having to spend the entire day with abusers. We had a lot of cases of young girls being raped by their fathers, by males at home, male relatives. So it's people you trust taking advantage of these young people. And I think that became a very huge problem because if they're being suppressed at home, they won't take it out. So imagine them engaging on these other technically higher issues. And then on the side of young people, I think the digital space also kind of created an opportunity for young people to be creative. I mean, TikTok, I think, went viral in this lockdown. That it's more young people on TikTok. So people are finding outlets. And it's not just for issues of politics as well, because we need to also understand there are other social issues, like issues of mental health. When I'm forced to stay at home, I'm not at school for an entire year. It means that I'm dealing with a lot of things. And sometimes when you don't have an outlet where I can actually spend my time, it becomes very difficult for a lot of young. So I think there are certain platforms that became an outlet for young people that were facing a lot of mental health issues. But I think the bigger thing is that idea of young people getting more space to create content. If you look at a lot of young people now producing podcasts, it all started within the lockdown. TV shows. I was running an online show every day. I was waking up, sitting on my couch, recording for 30 minutes, contacting young people outside Zimbabwe, in Zimbabwe, and getting content and sharing online. It didn't cost me anything. It was about getting my phone, recording myself, getting someone to edit and posting it online. So you find that, I think, young people found different ways in which they could contribute, to voices online. Then the last thing also would be, when people went on lockdown, I think the biggest challenge for developing countries like Zimbabwe is the issue of, social security. Zimbabwe is a highly informal economic kind of country, and a lot of people survive on vending. Like there are a lot of people that are vendors, are informally employed. So you discover that when we shut down the country, you're forcing people to stay at home without food, without any way of getting income. So you find that a lot of initiatives then came up led by young people that were finding ways of fundraising online, buying groceries for older people, for orphanages, for children living in the streets. For me, that's why even I did my online show, because I was like, in the midst of this pandemic, there is a good news to share. And we need to amplify the initiatives by those young people. So it's not every young person that got the opportunity to kind of do something. But I think in different ways, young people tried. They're still doing that outside the politics to say, people are going hungry. What can we do about it? People are not going to school. How do we educate those young ones? So I think.
Yeah, that's those are really good example, and also I had an issue with like when we were during the pandemic talking about like what could be the best options to do and stuff like you need to follow trends. I don't know in order to get the young people, and also TikTok here is getting really popular, and like nobody's using it at this point. As young people, we have to mention, I would say, our role in the world. How can we fight for democracy, and what should be your one advice how to fight for democracy?
Yeah, I think as a young person, it's about finding your voice. Like I don't think the fight for democracy is for people that are articulate, people that are able to speak in front of people, the debaters, public speakers, and motivational speakers. I think we can all fight for a democratic Zimbabwe, democratic Africa, democratic global society. And I think for a lot of young people, if you're a musician, how do I begin to in a socially conscious way, use my music to drive conversation, to document community stories? If I'm a filmmaker, if I'm a comedian, those are the people like, how do we begin to use that to actually contribute to the fight against injustice and things like that? And then also, I think it's also finding creative spaces to speak. If the government is clamping down on these WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups where there's certain titles that make it kind of, like if it's a youth for democracy, the government can easily penetrate that space and say, oh, they're talking about democracy. But I've seen how people are creatively finding spaces where we're talking about natural hair, we're talking about dreadlocks or earrings or African print materials. People actually speak about democratic issues in those. I remember there was a group, a natural hair group on Facebook, and someone would come in and say, oh, I used this conditioner for my hair. And then after that, they'll say, corruption is really a bad thing in our country. Have you seen how it's affecting women? Then someone would come in and say, yeah, I also use the same conditioner, or I wash my hair this often. And did you see what the minister did? It wasn't, like, for me, it was nice. I'm like, I'm in a space where I'm talking about hair, something I love. Yeah. It's
and also thing. An issue that is happening.
Like, and it's spaces where, like, for a feminine space, that women don't ordinarily form in huge numbers for this kind of conversations. But when you find them in that space, using that platform, I think it's powerful. So I think for young people, find your voice. What's my talent? What's my gift? What's the platform I have access to? How do I begin to use that to contribute to the fight? Because we all have a responsibility to build democratic countries and societies.
Thank you. I think you gave really good examples, and I want to thank you for sharing your story today. I think we can all learn from it, and like I would say, have the needed empowerment for us in like our countries on what can we work and what are the stuff that we can do. And it was a pleasure having you as our guest, and you are officially welcomed into our Democracy Fight Club.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking your time to share your story with us. Once again, thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Generation Democracy, LP, IRI, and for supporting and making sure to follow. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more episodes. Once again, thank you so much.